is going on, my fellow geeks, and welcome back to Raving Geeks, the weekly pop culture podcast from Central Michigan Life, where we discuss all things geek culture, which is like high culture, but better. If this is your first time joining us, make sure you follow the CM Life Instagram and Twitter pages for updates on the podcast, and look for us wherever you find your podcasts, including YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and on our website at www.cm-life.com. My name is Brendan Valentine, coming to you from the Arrow Cave, and I would like to thank you for joining me and my fellow co-hosts this week, who will introduce themselves in a second with our question of the week. I will introduce myself. As I said, I am Brendan Valentine, and our question of the week is, who would win in a fight, Godzilla or King Kong, and why? My answer is King Kong, simply because I take intelligence in a fight as the number one thing to win. Obviously Godzilla's more powerful, but I think Kong is just powerful enough and has the intelligence factor to beat Godzilla. I'll pass it on to our regular co-host of the week, Hope.
Hi everyone. So I'm Hope Gooderell. Who would win? I would also pick King Kong, because I feel like he's survived so much already that why wouldn't he beat Godzilla? And I would also like to add that there was a YouTube poll from Movie Clips Trailers asking this very question, and 60% of the 97,000 votes said that King Kong would win, and only 40% of those votes said Godzilla. So I think people agree with us.
Nice. And now we will have our guest this week. I'm very excited to introduce my friend Zane, who I have known for a few years. He used to be my roommate. And I'm very excited to have him on the podcast today. So Zane, do you want to introduce yourself and answer our question?
Yeah, hi. Thanks for having me on. I'm Zane Ozzello, and I'm already going to take a bit of a turn here, and I'm going to be picking Godzilla to defeat King Kong. I have a few reasons. First, he definitely has the strength factor and everything. He's got more powers. He's been tried by the forges of nuclear waste. And if we look back to the times of the dinosaurs reigning supreme over primates at that point. So I think we also have a bit of historical evidence to support that, if we would like to call that historical evidence.
I can definitely respect that argument. However, I still say monkey wins.
I always respect monkey.
Yes. All right. Thank you very much to our regular co-host and our guest. So to get started, like we normally do, we're just going to share some quick geek news. So Hope, do you have anything exciting for us going on in the world of pop culture this week?
I do. I have only one piece of information. Zack Snyder released images for the Justice League movie poster. And so Justice League will premiere on HBO Max on the 18th of March. So we get to look forward to that, and I'm excited.
Oh, wait, really? That's coming that soon?
Yeah. Yeah, I was like, oh, wow, that's fast.
I'm so excited. I thought that was going to be like a 2022 thing. That's dope. All right, I have two pieces of news this week. The first one is related to our opening question, but the trailer for Kong versus Godzilla did get released, and I have never been into the big kaiju movies. The only one that I ever watched and really enjoyed was Pacific Rim. But this one looks really, really good just from the trailer. And it's not that Kong Skull Island and Godzilla King of Monsters didn't look good, but I don't know, this one just hits different a little bit from the trailer. And also, as I'm sure many of you have heard, this takes a little bit of a departure from our normal news, but in the world of stocks and finances, GameStop stock shot up by over 1,000% over the last few weeks, which is awesome because I owned GameStop stock for a while and then sold it a few months ago.
That move, apparently.
Yeah, that one hurt. However, the whole story behind that is people from Reddit got a hold of some information that the Wall Street people were betting on GameStop to lose, so they bet that it would win, and now the rich Wall Street hedge fund managers now lost billions of dollars apparently, which I just think it's really funny. I think it's a hilarious joke. I love the internet. So that is it for my news. So transitioning into our main topic of the week, and the reason I asked Zane to be on this podcast episode is if any of you are fans of the CW network, specifically the what is known as the Arrowverse amongst the geek community. The shows that were cut off early last season and have been delayed until what would normally be the mid-season of the 2020-2021 TV year have started premiering. So we just wanted to give a quick overview of those shows and some other CW shows as well. Just give our thoughts on where we hope the new season is going to go, what we thought of the end of the last season, and just some fun conversation about the Arrowverse in general. So Hope, I know you are not as into the Arrowverse shows as Zane and I, but you have more information on the non-Arrowverse CW shows. Is there anywhere you want to start?
Well, so Nancy Drew has premiered the next season, and so we're going back in with the Igleka that was tormenting the Drew crew. We are also dealing with the surprise of who Nancy's real parents are. I will not come out and say that because I feel like that's a big plot twist for people, and if they haven't watched the season, just know that it is not the original characters, like the I can't remember their names, but you know, those who gave Nancy Drew her name Nancy Drew are not her actual parents. And so seeing what the Igleka is doing to torment the Drew crew is going to be very interesting, especially because
Question. What's the Igleka?
Okay,
for those of us not familiar with the Drew crew.
The Igleka is a spirit that there was a essentially like legend that if you went into the water surrounding the town and asked the Igleka for something, or like if you looked in the mirror on a certain day, you could ask the Igleka for something, and the idea was that she was supposed to give it to you. So she is a spirit, and the Igleka also essentially asks for something in return before she gives you what you wished for. And if you don't give her what she wants, then she essentially comes to take your life and kill you. And so there is some mystery about what the Igleka actually is, if she's just a random spirit, or if she was a spirit, like a human first who then was killed, and so she's essentially a vengeful spirit. And so the Drew crew had asked her for help in season 1, and then she wanted the blood of a certain character, and they were like, no, we're not killing him, and so basically angered the Igleka. And so yeah, we get to deal with the Igleka and Nancy dealing with who her real parents are and all that. Yes.
So quick question. Is this in any way related to like the shared universe of Riverdale and the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina? Because it sounds like it would fit right in.
I haven't seen them do like any crossovers, but it's definitely a darker story of Nancy Drew than like what we're used to, especially with the Emma Roberts movie like 10 years ago now. Actually, probably more than 10 years ago. Just weird to think about.
Well, I know like Chilling Adventures of Sabrina and Riverdale haven't necessarily had like a crossover, but like they mention the town of Riverdale and Sabrina. So I was just wondering if they had those nods to it, because they sound like they have the same vibes and would fit together.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything, or if I did, it just didn't spark in my mind, like connect that that's what they're talking about. But I know Riverdale is also coming back on. And I will be honest and say that like I haven't kept up with Riverdale as much because I've kind of gotten annoyed with some characters. And I'll also be completely honest and say that I have not watched The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina the Teenage Witch. So
I know Zane has.
Zane?
Yes, I like it very much.
So have you heard anything that might connect Chilling Adventures of Sabrina with any of the other like CW shows? I know Riverdale has had a connection, but do you have any reason to suspect Nancy Drew might be involved too?
For sure it's connected to Riverdale, but that's also because they're both ran by Archie Comics. So they already have that shared. But I mean, I'll be the first to admit I've not at all been engaged in Nancy Drew in the slightest, so I wouldn't know. It definitely sounds like it has that darker tone that's characteristic of the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina along with Riverdale. So I think it's possible, but I haven't heard anything because I don't watch Riverdale either. But having watched all of the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, I heard nothing that would necessarily lend to thinking it's related to Nancy Drew based on my knowledge.
Interesting. Well, if any listeners are fans of any one of those individual shows, we would recommend the other two, just because they seem to have similar vibes.
Yeah, I will definitely say that Riverdale has its, or not Riverdale, Nancy Drew has its drama, but Riverdale has so much more drama. So if you really like drama, I would definitely suggest Riverdale in that aspect, because there is a lot of like relationships and not just like, romantic relationships, like relationships with parents and like teachers and siblings, and so
like your typical CW drama.
Exactly.
Like it's well rounded in who is upset with whom.
Yes.
Got it. Any other non-Arrowverse related shows? I know you were excited about Walker coming out too.
Yes. I unfortunately did not get to watch the second episode because I was not able to access live TV at that time. But that is on my watch list for today or tomorrow, because the first episode like set up the entire series so nicely. And I know like a lot of people are like, well, Walker Texas Ranger had Chuck
Norris.
Norris, thank you. I was Nolan. I was like, Nolan is not right. Chuck
Yeah,
Norris.
Christopher Nolan, the director.
Yeah. But and how Chuck Norris was like a lot of like kung fu karate stuff. Because it is Jared Padalecki and he was on Supernatural, which of course is my background because I loved that show. It's not as much that way, but it's more grounded in like real life stuff. So you've got Cartel, because it is in Texas. So you've got Cartel. And also the fact that Jared Padalecki's real life wife, Jen Padalecki, is playing his fictional wife and gets murdered in the first episode. And hearing Jared Padalecki's like torment, you just know that he was like, you have to be on set when I film this scene because I need to know that you're actually alive and not actually dead. And so that broke my heart completely. But it's so good. And like, I have so many questions that's keeping me intrigued. Like if certain characters are connected to the death of his wife and like watching the relationship between his kids and him as it comes on, because like it was one of those that their mother was murdered and then he essentially went undercover for a while, for a few months, like 10 months, and his kids are teenagers, and so his daughter's like, we needed you, we lost our mom and then we lost our dad too. So there's that like tension of, is that relationship going to be able to be rebuilt? And then the son who's like, no, dad, everything's fine and it's great. And you're like, honey, you're hurting and I don't want you to break. So that's going to be interesting to see if that happens.
It's not just like the old kung fu movies. It's also got like that family nice. Also, the CW like casting real life couples as like couples in a show happens so much, and it's not weird, but it happened like once you realize that it happens like in every show, it's like why do you do this every time? Like I feel like the producers are like super like uncomfortable with making other people not kiss their spouse, so they just cast their spouse. Like
I feel like part of it's like if they're like gonna have it where the characters are going to be in pain because something happens to their spouse, that like it's more authentic if it's your real spouse. So I
Good
feel
point.
like that
I just think it's
part-
funny.
Yeah.
I also think that because like the CW tends to have more of a limited budget, I think it might be easier to draw on actors that are like obligated to join because of, you know, the marital ties. So I think it's easier to, because like, I mean, we've seen in Arrowverse where they won't always pair them as couples. They just bring them in as other characters, and it just fills a need.
The big ones that pop into my head were Supergirl, where with Kara and Mon-El, like the actors are married. With Legends of Tomorrow, Brandon Routh, and what's her name that plays Nora Dark?
Courtney Ford.
Yes,
Courtney Ford.
And
But
they're married.
But also, Stephen Amell's wife came in as a villain in the crossover. So that's like an example of where they just bring them in. Or like Robbie Amell coming in Flash.
Oh yeah, after Stephen Amell like has this like long-standing thing. It's like, we're gonna cast his cousin as Firestorm.
Yeah. Which okay, I'm not gonna lie. I was like, this is his brother, and then I looked it up. I was like, they're cousins, but they have so many mannerisms and like facial expressions that I'm like, you have to be brothers, not cousins. Come on.
Mm-hmm. And wasn't Robbie Amell technically on the CW before Stephen Amell with the Tomorrow People?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. So,
and the other thing about couples, really quick, with Supernatural, because Jared Padalecki actually met his wife on Supernatural when she was playing a demon, and in one of the early seasons, like season 3 or 4, I think. So it was interesting for that, but then also in like season 14 or 15, they had Danielle Ackles, who is Jensen Ackles' wife, come in. So when like Jensen Ackles, when Dean was taken over by Michael, they had Danielle come in, and so, you know, just going off with the wife and everything. So I thought, you know, that was
it's definitely a trope of the CW to just like cast their spouse. But moving on to the Arrowverse shows, only one of them has technically premiered so far, but we've gotten some interesting tidbits on some of the other shows. So we're going to start with the one that's premiered, which is Batwoman. And the biggest thing about this second season of the show is the actress who played Batwoman in season 1 decided to leave the show. Yep. So instead of Ruby Rose as Kate Kane's Batwoman, they recast the main role, but did not like keep the same main character. Like Kate Kane is no longer the main character of Batwoman. She is no longer Batwoman. Now we have Javicia Leslie's character, who is playing Batwoman, is a very different type of hero. So Zane, I wanted to ask you specifically, what do you think of the shift, the change between Ruby Rose to Javicia Leslie as Batwoman?
Well, so first off, I would like to kind of touch on like the transition, like from a plot standpoint. It was really interesting. So first, obviously spoilers to the episode, but essentially there's just a plane crash and the plane is returning from National City. But the thing is, we find out that Kate Kane was supposed to be on that plane. And so first off, we know that she was in National City, which tells us that she might have been with Supergirl. So my first thought is maybe we'll hear more about like what was going on in Supergirl, what might have happened to our Kate Kane. So that's always something that we can leave in the air kind of there. But we find at that point, we then find Ryan Wilder finds the bat suit and she decides she's going to take that to avenge the death of her adopted mother. And so right off the bat, I love the theme of the revenge, because I think when you're dealing with a bat character, so in this case, Batwoman, revenge always tends to be a comfortable theme to fit them in because it's vengeance, that kind of dark grittiness. And so I think that's always a good way to deal with her. But one of the things that I'm actually really liking about her character is there's more of a, I don't want to say joy, but there's a different kind of lightness to the way she is that Kate Kane didn't have. Like, I think Kate Kane was a very good character. Like, don't get me wrong at all. I thought that was a very good casting and I thought she was very entertaining. But I like this interesting dynamic. And I think her am interested to hear more about like her quote unquote credentials to be Batwoman, because all we know right now is she's a martial arts teacher. Like she has a martial arts training. And so that's like her claim to it. But she doesn't know how to work the bat suit, which why would you? And so that's very interesting, but I'm very interested to see how we end up feeding off of the dynamics of last season, because season 1 was so heavily intertwined with the family dynamics of Kate Kane with her dad, with Alice. And because of especially lending to the fact that that season was cut short abruptly due to COVID-19, how this is going to go, because like now all of a sudden we have a new Batwoman that's working with Luke Cox, who was, you know, a friend of Kate Kane. We're with Kate Kane's adoptive sister. And we're now all of a sudden there's this new dynamic with her father. There's what's going to be driving Alice in terms of like a villainy standpoint, because before it was that dynamic with the family, but now what is going to be Alice's relevance with a Batwoman that isn't her sister, you know?
Yes. And I know you haven't watched episode 2 yet. We talked about this before the podcast, but they already are starting to answer those questions. And like, it's
okay.
Right off the bat. They're not like going like, oh, whatever. We're just going to completely redefine it. The thing I've liked a lot is they're really embracing like this. Kate Kane is gone, but in a way that makes it seem like if Ruby Rose wanted to come back, they totally could bring her back as Batwoman and have Kate Kane come back. It's very up in the air, even though like we as like an audience know like Ruby Rose is not going to be Batwoman. In universe, it's very like convoluted. That could be something that, like you said, comes up in Supergirl. It could come back in Batwoman. It could come up in like a crossover, like what happened to Kate Kane, like a whole like CW Justice League coming together. Like, well, we lost one of our members. Let's find her.
Oh, only one.
Only one. We lose all of them all the time, especially like last year. We just lost so many people.
I mean, to be fair though, CW shows have a habit of being like, this person's dead. Psych, we brought him back. So
well, the thing is too, they weren't even like, this person's dead. They're like, is Kate alive? Is Kate dead? Like, is Kate still Batwoman? No. But one thing that I found really interesting in the episode, specifically in the season premiere, again, spoilers, but Alice explained her whole plan to kill Kate. And I was like, my theory is that Ruby Rose told the producers like way back in like November or December of like before they'd finished filming, even like the middle part of the second half of the season, that she doesn't want to come back. And I have a feeling they were going to kill her off. Like that was the plan for the end of season 1. You had Hush coming in as Bruce Wayne, which allowed him to get in there. Like Alice had the perfect plan to have like the Crows corner Batwoman and have Kate's father kill her, pull off the mask and realize he just killed his own daughter. I thought they had the guts to do that.
Which is
and then we never got it. That would have been insane.
And that's the perfect it's like the perfect thing for Alice's character, because I mean Alice is one of the best characters I've seen in a while in that, but it's so interesting because she's so mentally unstable, but she has such a strong feelings about her family, and moreover she does care deeply for Kate Kane, but at the same, because like we can see the way that she's looked for her, she doesn't want to kill herself. Like that's the example. Like she's mad, but she doesn't want to kill herself. And in her own way, in episode 1, we see her in a full black outfit with the black lace veil over her face. Like she's clearly in a mourning outfit. Like it's such a strange dynamic, but the juxtaposition of her being in that, and then her saying at the same time, she's talking about how she wanted to have their father kill his daughter and find out that he killed the daughter. It's such a amazing writing by the CW and the way that they depicted the scene, but also that's such a good plan. Like how else, what better way to stick it to your father who wouldn't find you after you were taken away, you know? Like I thought it was amazing.
And then the implications for how that would have impacted season 2 as well. Like having the arc of if Alice is still around in season 2, like where does she go from here? Like she won. Yeah. Like how does she feel after that? And then the whole like dynamic with the Crows and like with Jacob being like the director, and you're like, oh crap, I killed my daughter. Where do I go from here? Like, do I still feel like I can command the crows? Like, I was very blind, and I wasn't able to see clearly through the situation, and that caused me to murder my child. And then everything with like Sophie would have found out that Kate Kane was Batwoman, not through the letter that she gets in season 2, but from Kate dying and having the cowl like peeled off of her by her boss, which is also her dad. And I think that would have just made the dynamic, and especially with Ryan Wilder coming in as Batwoman, I feel like it would have been like a whole thing with like primarily Luke, but also like the whole like Bat squad of like, is it okay to replace Kate? Because right now it feels like it's out of necessity, but if that would have been how it would have ended, it would have been like, is this too soon? Because we don't have a necessity for Batwoman. People know Batwoman's dead. She doesn't have to come back. Should we let this happen? So I thought that would have been really interesting.
I want
overall, oh yeah, go for it.
Really quick. So my dad and I were actually talking about this because I had actually gotten really upset that Ruby Rose was like, hey, you know, 1 season, yeah, it's fun, but see ya.
Same here. I really enjoyed her.
Well, come to find out, she got injured during a stunt.
Yeah.
And so that's probably the biggest reason why she decided to quit. And so you talking about like mid-season, the directors knowing that like she wanted to leave is very likely, because if it was like they filmed the stunt and then she got hurt and then after she was like, guys, I don't know if I want to do this anymore because like my life is more important than doing, you know, stunts. That maybe that's something that they were also thinking about, because if they're bringing in a new person and her only background for being able to be Batwoman is martial arts, maybe it's like they're trying to be more conscientious about like their actors and trying to keep their actors safe.
I feel like Jessica Leslie, I don't know what her actual background is, but I don't know if like for the like stunts on set, how much of those she's doing and how much Double's doing.
Well, I think that goes into what Zane was saying about low budget for CW, because I know with like Supernatural, a lot of the stunts were done by, you know, the actors themselves. But I also know that with like other shows like on NBC, like Chicago PD had done their own stunts, but then a couple of their actors got like seriously injured and they're like, nope, we need stunt doubles. So I think they're probably going to try and bring in stunt doubles. So they might get going more with more action and like trying to get the new Batwoman to be like more.
Right now, the stunts seem kind of like comedic because she doesn't know like how the batsuit works. She doesn't know how to use the grappling hook. Like all of the landings look really bad. Like, and you can tell that they're kind of like playing off of it. And I feel like that's going to be a recurring joke this season. It's like, what does this button do? And then like something like weird.
The nice thing, I also think that definitely, because another thing Ruby Rose commented on is how she didn't realize how grueling the schedule was. And that's one of the things that like, because not only do you commit to, when you commit to the Arrowverse, you're committing to your own show, main character. So that's recurring, but they do it in these large swaths of just filming both at one time they have the break and another break, but you're committing to other shows because of your crossovers. Like it's essentially worked in. But also the thing is, like you said, because of this, a lot of these actors aren't necessarily like high level. Like Ruby Rose was probably the highest level actor they brought in up to that point. But like you talk about other ones, like this is their chance to really get big. Like Stephen Amell trained with a boat to make it look more believable as Arrow, because he wanted, you know. And so I think when you have characters like this that are invested like wholeheartedly like this and putting in this much time, you find them very much ingrained with their characters. But if you end up getting hurt, you end up getting hurt, you have these long schedules. I don't blame her for leaving at all. Like I'm not saying anybody else is blaming her. It's, if it makes sense, you know, it's a large commitment. And I think it's a rewarding experience from what a lot of people say, but at the same time, that doesn't always make it worth it, you know?
Exactly. And then overall, I've been very pleased. Like, also, I'm not blaming Ruby Rose at all. I enjoyed her run on the show, but I understand and I respect her decision. However, the thing I was worried about was how they transition the show, and they've done a really good job. Like, I've thought it's been phenomenal. I only have one like issue, and that's the relationships between Ryan and the other characters. It feels a little shoehorned, but also like if that's the only problem, I have no issues. The big one that I have an issue with is between her and Mary. They seem way too chummy, like off the bat.
Yeah, right off the bat.
That was really weird. Like I kind of like the like dynamic with Luke, like how that's going, where like he doesn't trust her, but like recognizes like there's a necessity for Batwoman. But with Mary, it's just weird.
Yeah, because the thing is, like, obviously Mary's personality is much more outgoing. Is kind of like how they portray her, like how much she wanted to befriend Kate. But we knew she wanted to befriend Kate because they were sisters, you know, like that's what they were going at. But you're right. I was very worried that they were just like, oh, there's a residual shockwave from Crisis, and now she's changed, like something like that, like really blunt. But this is very well worked. I agree with that. But like you said, it felt like, oh, new Batwoman. We'll put her in the new Batwoman role, and we'll acknowledge she's not the same Batwoman. But we're going to make the relationships with the characters that are like directly helping her as like the Bat team. We're going to make it just like work out right off the bat. But I anticipate that maybe in a few episodes, there's going to be like a big schism point where they have a large argument that'll maybe level things off and make it more realistic. But I agree with you there, Brendan.
That's my one issue. The thing that I think the CW has more recently kind of figured out is they've always had like this kind of like relevancy, political kind of agenda in a lot of their shows, but they've always kept it really subtle until around like Supergirl season 3 to season 4. And then season 4 just like embraced the whole, like, you know, people used to call her social justice warrior girl as like an insult. But then once they embraced that, the show was like exceptionally good and was
their identity. Like, yeah.
That once they, instead of like saying like, oh, we're just going to comment on it in the background, they're like, we're going to make this the focus. And I think they've kind of done that here, instead of saying, you know, oh, we're just going to kind of like subtly change Batwoman. They're like, no, this is like a big difference. People will be able to tell that, you know, Kate Kane was white and Ryan Wilder was black. And like, that is a big difference. And people will know that she is a different Batwoman. Also, like, I know you haven't watched episode 2 yet, Zane, but like, there's literally a line where, they're trying to like, there's a protest downtown and they're trying to figure out how like Batwoman could show up to like disperse the protest, because Alice has this big plan that'll hurt people. And then Mary's like, we'll just have Ryan wear the batsuit. And Luke is like, that won't work. And Mary's like, why not? And he's like, she's black. And like, that's it. And I'm like, okay, thank you for like acknowledging that is a difference, and then working with it and moving on, instead of just saying like, oh, you know, there's no problem. Like, no, they're acknowledging it and working with it. And I like when the CW does that, because I think when they take things head on, it usually hits.
Because you're aware of what's going on. Like, for example, I'm going to draw it to that Supergirl. Like, once Supergirl hit, like, season 4 is probably their best season, because they embraced what they were going at. They found something that was not only political, but topically political. And it really hit well. But if you compare it to the season before, I can think of 2 instances where they kind of tried to make it underline. Like in season 3, they started bringing in the struggles with like gun control and gun violence, but they weren't embracing it at the time. So it felt like, while it was a poignant point and it was very important, it was odd because it was just kind of like wedged in. Or like occasionally Flash will bring in something like that, where it's a little more based on like topically political and things like that. But because the show isn't like in that vein, it just is very strange. And it seems the CW doesn't know how to like subtly insert them. But if the CW is like, we're going to take it and run with it, they're very good at it. And I think that's something that they definitely learned with Supergirl, and they've been able to definitely apply it to Batwoman, it sounds like.
I think another thing with Supergirl was the CW was still trying to find their footing with that show.
Because it started on CBS, yeah.
Yeah, so they were like trying to be like, how do we, you know, maintain season 1 characters and, you know, relationships, and how do we also introduce new things? So I think that was, you know, they were slipping and sliding and testing out, and then it took them this long, you know, till season 4 to just be like, nope, this is what we need to do. We're just not going to try and appease, you know, the original season 1 and CBS, and just
That's a
go.
really good point. I forgot about like how tough that transition was because I didn't watch Supergirl season 1 like live. I didn't get into it until it was on the CW.
Yeah.
So that's a really good point.
Because they had to change filming sites because they didn't, so they took it up to Vancouver, and that's why Kat Grant left, is because she didn't want to be in Vancouver because she wanted to stay filming where she was. So that's why they got rid of that. And at that point, also, that's when I really felt like Kara was able to develop because she no longer had that quote unquote role model. Like, so I definitely think I agree. Once CW took ownership of it as their own, that's when it really started to lift off.
Cool. So, quick final point on Batwoman. Does anyone have any really strong hopes or predictions for this current season?
I think that like you were talking about earlier with like having the not well-known actors coming in and playing these iconic characters, and then having them become stronger with their relationship to their character. I think that, you know, they're going to play on the lightness of the new Batwoman of Ryan Wilder, as well as like keeping it dark. Because I mean, Batman universe and like the Batwoman and, you know, that whole thing is a very dark series in general. But I think the idea around Batwoman is, you know, they are supposed to bring light. And so having the new actress being able to better create a character for herself and like come into her own confidence, like I think that's gonna make Batwoman even stronger, in my opinion. That's my prediction. All right.
Nice. Zane, do you have anything yet? I know after one episode, it's hard to like pull on like, this is how I want the season to end. But
my biggest, so I don't know how it goes. I mean, I'd like to continue to see Alice's growth, like that kind of thing, because, you know, obviously. But the one thing I am kind of a little more interested in is how they're going to continue to handle the whole Bruce Wayne of it all, because now his cousin's gone. So there's less of a need to bring him back as Batman. Like, not even if you bring him back as Batman, but we've also essentially eliminated Bruce Wayne Hush. Ryan Wilder kind of was able to slide that off, if you will. And so we got about 2 episodes of knowing what Bruce Wayne looks like in the Arrowverse, but we didn't get any Bruce Wayne, and you don't necessarily need it, which has been proven by Supergirl and not having Superman right away, you know, but it'll always be something that's on people's minds, especially because the Bruce Wayne appearance was brought in. And so I'm interested to see if there's going to be something that's a little more towards that in this season, or at the very least, I'd like to see the season address how we'll continue to deal with this overarching Wayne Enterprises kind of thing. Like, because Wayne is obviously huge in Gotham, but now we don't have really a strong connecting point to Wayne itself, other than like children of Alfred Pennyworth, children of Lucius Fox, you know? So I'm interested in that.
I have a quick question, really quick. Do you think that they would bring in Robin at all and try and connect it that way, or no?
Dick Grayson Robin? No. Tim Drake, Stephanie Brown, or Damian Wayne? Maybe.
Okay.
That's actually one of my predictions. Is I would like to see kind of an expansion on the Bat family, because I think Kate had, you know, the Marine training, like basically did the whole like Batman arc, like going around the world to figure that out. Ryan doesn't have that, so I feel like bringing in more like Bat characters to kind of build like a team would be really cool. One thing I'm really hoping for is we see Luke Fox as Batwing, where he kind of gets like his engineer on and brings that in. But I'd love to like maybe not Tim Drake, Stephanie Brown, or Damian Wayne as Robin, but like having them make an appearance would be kind of cool, just to kind of keep that Batman relevancy.
Kind of like how in sorry.
No, go for it.
I was thinking like Dark Knight Rises, it was kind of implied that Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character was going to be the Robin, like that kind of thing. Like, I think something like that where you can tell it's inserted, or maybe we start hearing about like Officer Gordon, like Chief Gordon in there, like somehow. So we know that there's like that training, so that plants in the mind of his daughter. We get to see things like that. Or maybe because it seems to be a little more in the future, we might see something like a Nightwing appearance, kind of, you know. But
that would be cool. I'm down for those appearances, but I don't.
You know.
Yes, like I'm down for the appearances. I'm down to hear from them. I don't want them to take over the show.
No, because that's the thing because of how iconic these characters are, especially because of Batman. There's nothing like, it was the same worry with bringing Superman to Supergirl. Mm-hmm. How do we do this and not take it away from her?
And they did a good job.
Some would argue, yeah, they did an incredibly good job. So I know they have the ability to do it, but some would argue that Batman's an even bigger fish to fry. Mm-hmm. So you want to be even more careful with that.
Mm-hmm. I think
and my last, sorry, Hope.
I was gonna say, I think personally that they're not gonna bring in Batman until they have a solid person to play Batman.
They already have the actor.
Well, true, but you know how like they're doing with Supergirl, and then now they have the Superman and Lois series coming out.
Oh,
like I think
I could see that, yeah.
Like doing something like that. And I don't know. I'm kind of one of those, like, I know Gotham was Fox, but it might be interesting to see like if any of those actors transition over to Batwoman.
I know in Crisis there wasn't necessarily anything directly relating Gotham, like that show, to the CW verse, which is the reason I'm thinking we won't get that much like Gotham crossover. However, if they do get the rights to that and talk with Fox, just because like Fox has like lost shows and lost properties, like Lucifer going over to Netflix and stuff like that, they might be willing to try and like revive that.
Yeah.
But my last prediction, it'll be weird. It'll just because Gotham was such a different vibe than every other Batman property ever.
Oh, yeah.
But my last prediction for Batwoman is so Kate Kane kept with Bruce Wayne's like Bat code, like no killing, like the innocents are like off limits. Mm-hmm. Ryan Wilder does not have that, and I want to see the development of like her own code. Maybe not necessarily the Batman no killing, but the okay, maybe I can under certain circumstances. It's similar to like with Oliver throughout like the seasons of Arrow, but I think it's going to be so much different just because Batman has that really strong like no killing, but Batwoman doesn't.
No.
So we've talked a lot about Batwoman so far, and we've had episodes to go off of, so there's a lot to build off of. But I want a quick touch on each of the other upcoming shows. As far as I know, I'm the only one here that has watched and thoroughly enjoyed Black Lightning, like in its fullest. So I can just give a quick recap, minor spoilers for last season where we ended off. I really enjoyed the way they ended the last season. The one thing about Black Lightning that's really weird is they don't have necessarily like a season villain the way like Arrow and Flash do. Because like you kind of like gets hinted at episode 1, you know, you get the big showdown at the mid-season, and then the whole second half of the season is like interspersed with figuring out how to defeat the main villain. That hasn't been how Black Lightning has been. Like you've had like a big overarching villain, but then you've had like someone else come in. Like for season 1, it was Tobias Whale, but then you got Khalil as Painkiller coming in, which was big. So like Painkiller was technically the season villain, but Tobias Whale was still around. Season 2, you had Tobias Whale still, but then you also had the ASA like coming in as like a real threat. And then season 3 comes and Freeland is under occupation by the ASA. The whole world like is unaware of this. But then by the end of the season, you have this new villain called Gravedigger who was working with the Markovians, which is the whole reason the ASA put Freeland on lockdown. So the Markovians couldn't come steal all the metahumans. So there's a lot of stuff going on, which in my opinion has made Black Lightning really hard to follow. But I feel like by the end of season 3, everything kind of came to a head and all of the complicated things kind of melded into one. And I think Crisis helped with that, kind of bringing it into the CW verse so they could like kind of end some storylines that weren't going anywhere and focus like the big 3 things that they still had going on into one. Zane, what was the last Black Lightning thing you watched? And Hope, have you watched any Black Lightning?
I have seen clips because I so I will say it's on my list to watch, but I tend to get distracted by other shows or other things like rewatching things. But it's on my list. I've seen clips because China Anne McClain is one of the daughters, right?
Lightning.
Yeah. And I absolutely love her in Disney Channel shows. Like when she was on Ant Farm, it was adorable.
She does a great job in Black Lightning season 3. Yeah. Like for season 1 and season 2, she's like, okay, she's still developing her power, still developing her character. But season 3, she's like, I'm a freaking powerhouse and you better get out of my way. Yeah. It's so good.
She's definitely like my big thing for watching it because she's phenomenal and everything she does. And also the fact that like we had representation of African American superheroes, and I'm like, we need this. So it's on my list, but I will say I don't know that much about.
That's one of my favorite things about Black Lightning is like all of the other like CW shows have kind of like this dark tone, especially during like fight sequences. It's really dramatic. But Black Lightning plays hip hop during the fight sequences, and it is awesome. That is my favorite part of the show. Like he's kicking ass. Like I forget like who like which artists, because like it's someone different every time, and it's not always someone major. But like it's like this is some, it's got a hard beat, you got some rap going, and it's so good. It's so good.
Like I was watching because so like this kind of segues into like answering your question. The one I watched straight through was season 1, and one of my defining moments is Black Lightning was in a fight, and then all of a sudden Timmy Turner by Designer starts playing in the background as he's just beating, and like that's the perfect example of it. Like because like I don't know, like the only other scene that has like had that dark, like strong of fight sequences and still plays music in the background is Arrow, but it's always like this deep alternative rock kind of in the background, like in the jail sequences, but this is like, it's high energy and it matches that electricity that they all have as like the power, like Black Lightning is like electric, and it feels electric and dynamic, and it's just lively, but so to answer your question, I watched all of season 1. I watched sporadically in season 2 and season 3. Like the reason I watched around season 3 was around Crisis, and because I just wanted to see, because I knew Black Lightning was coming to Crisis, so I wanted to be like aware of it. And that was actually pretty cool how they brought him in. But one of my favorite parts about Black Lightning is he's an older hero. Mm-hmm. He's not, all of ours are like, late 20s, like young to late 20s, early 30s, but Black Lightning's a father. He has a day job. Like he is, he works. He's seen life. He's seen what the toll of this life is. And he wanted to put it away, but he comes back because he believes in something greater, And I think it's also really cool to see that, because if all of your characters are young as heroes, it makes it easy to have them all fall into these repeating storylines and problems. But I mean, like I said, I only really watched season 1 sporadically from there, but the problems Black Lightning faced on a day-to-day basis weren't the same that the other characters faced, both as an attribute of his race and of his age. And I thought that created a more diversity in storylines to the CW's portfolio of superheroes. And
also it's like because of his like daughters becoming superheroes too, he takes that perspective of like how Jay Garrick would to Barry Allen. Yeah. And now it's from Jay's perspective, like Jay's like, Barry, you idiot, don't mess with the timeline. But from Barry's perspective, we're like, he had to mess with the timeline. But in Black Lightning, it's like, Thunder, you idiot, don't go like mess with these demonstrations. That's a whole like political move. And she's like, but I had to. And it's like, no. Yeah,
and he's been there, like he knows. Yeah, it's great because you're not only parenting as a parent, but you're parenting as a superhero.
As a superhero.
And you get to see both of them and how that plays between the two.
Yeah, for sure. Also, it did get announced that this upcoming season will be the final season of Black Lightning. I'm mildly disappointed because I feel like this one just kind of, got its feet in the ground and had more longevity than some of the other shows. Because I feel like from here you could build out, what does Thunder look like as a hero? What does Lightning look like post like high school? Like, is she going to go straight into superheroing? Is she going to try and have a normal life? Especially with her interactions with Khalil. So my hopes and predictions is like this one, like for Black Lightning, is that it ends on a note that like suggests what might keep happening, even if we might not see it. We haven't seen any like clips or anything for Black Lightning yet, but my hope is that, we get not necessarily closure, but like Black Lightning story's done, but we know maybe Thunder and Lightning's isn't, Painkillers isn't, and stuff like that.
And so they can draw them back into, if need be, as time
in like a crossover with other shows later on and things like that.
I think it might be really cool if they did do like a spin-off with Thunder and Lightning and like having that sister dynamic too. And just like you said, like what happens after high school? Are you going to try and live a normal life, or are you going to And maybe even like having them go to a different city, even to like try and break out from under their dad's shadow or something.
I hadn't thought about that just because Freeland is like such an integral part of the Black Lightning story.
Mm-hmm.
Like even from the like in the comics, I'm pretty sure the origin for Black Lightning is Freeland is actually just a part of Metropolis, and that Superman somehow ignores. And Black Lightning's like, well, if you're not going to save us, I will. But like Freeland still has that dynamic here. Also, one thing I know you guys haven't watched like the end of season 3, but one of my favorite parts about the villain Gravedigger, that ends up being like the main antagonist of season 3 at the very end, is his existence explains why Black Lightning is special. Like I won't spoil why, but like that was one of the plot points that bugged me throughout season 1. Is like, all right, you have the green light vaccine, that all of the kids are frozen in pods because they're unstable, but Black Lightning's the one that isn't, and it explains why. Which cool. I will not spoil that, but that was one of like the biggest like things that like I still have gears turning. Like I know like his dad was important and Gamby was somehow involved, but like that doesn't explain like biologically why he was different. This one does. So
yeah, so especially knowing that and having only watched, like, so at least from my experience, having watched season 1 and knowing that there's that light further on, it makes me more interested in seeing more. And I feel like other people would feel the same way.
Awesome. All right, quick, moving on to Supergirl. The way that one ended was it was also cut short a bit, but I feel like there was a lot more with Supergirl that we weren't like. It seemed like a season finale with what happened, even though there was going to be another episode.
Yes. Right off the bat, my biggest one, everything I want in this last season, I want Brainiac Brainy. That's my go-to. That's all I'm hoping for. Like, and I think that would be the perfect ending to it. I want Brainiac Brain because this is the last season of Supergirl. So first up, and the interesting is we still have Lex Luthor there. So right off the bat, I would like to see this end up being, I think because Brainy is essentially going to have to reboot is my assumption after this. And I think it'll unlock a Brainiac. And I think this is going to be, it could be one of those villain for the first half. And then the second half, it kind of switches. So the first half is Brainy's rebooting and he wants to help stop Luthor. But to do so, he has to become more like Brainiac. And then they stop Luthor at the midpoint. But then Brainiac is the second half. And to help wrap up the season, we need to bring back the Legion of Superheroes so we get Mon-El back for Supergirl at the end.
And then Supergirl goes back to the future with the Legion of Superheroes to retire, just like it did in Justice League Unlimited.
Exactly, with Mon-El. And I think that's perfect because one of the big things in the whole season, and it's been kind of, I don't want to say contrived, but painful, is that Supergirl just can't find anyone like Mon-El. And that's just, it keeps coming back. And even like last season, they tried to, I can't remember, he's British. What was his name?
No, he's not British. It's Chris Wood. Oh, are you talking about the Okay. Yeah, sorry.
The new character.
The news reporter. He never like was important to here. I have a phone. I can look it up.
I was going to say, I'll look it up right now.
But like last season, they wanted to give him that new love interest. And first off, fans were ruthless to that poor man. There was no reason that they should have been that against him. Like, yes, I agree that Mon-El was the match for Supergirl, but he was decent. But like, it didn't work. Like, she couldn't find that same vibe. And I think that's been something that she's always been really focused on as a character. Like, she found herself and everything like that. But she's also always been trying to, keep up with that. And so I think it would be interesting to see him come back. But overall, I really just want to see where we're at with Brainy, Were
you talking about William Day?
Yes.
Okay.
William.
That's it.
He was fine. I think he would have been a cool, kind of like what Jimmy Olsen is to Superman, if like they would have done that, because he had that background with Leviathan, which I feel like spreads out more to the Luthors as well. However, like as a love interest, I'm not loving it. However, like I don't hate that he's on the show.
I was gonna say the few times that I saw him, he just seemed really cocky, and I was like, Supergirl does not seem like the type of person that would go for that. But
I think the biggest issue is he's brought in as a new character, but they didn't allow him to develop as a character before they started lumping him with Supergirl. And because it was clear that he was eventually going to be a love interest, but he wasn't fleshed out as his own character. And because of that, his only focus ended up being with Supergirl. but he didn't have any depth. So that's why what might have been endearing cockiness, if he was developed, it didn't come off that way because of that.
Mm-hmm.
That's fair.
So, Zane, what you said about Brainiac, in my notes of what I wanted to talk about with Supergirl, I had 3 points, and that was Brainy, Lena, and Lex, and that's it. And you talked about Brainy and Lex. But the end with Lena, I think her arc in season 5 was really, really good. I wanted her to be the season villain so bad, like to overtake Leviathan. But I'm happy that they're back on the same side, and I think she's going to be key to stopping Brainiac and stopping Lex Luthor. And she's my favorite. Yeah, she's my favorite character in like the whole Supergirl arc, or throughout the seasons. Lena Luthor has been my favorite. But I think that transition of like, she's not a villain, but she's not on Supergirl's team anymore, was really good. And I want to see, I want to see the aftermath of that.
Yeah, might be interesting to see her as like an anti-hero, like especially if now that like she's kind of like mad at Supergirl and Kara, and like just that whole of, I'm not necessarily on your side, but I'm not on, still trying to break away from the Luthor name, but like also like it just might be interesting to see her as that anti-hero of.
Overall, between Brainy and the Luthors, I feel like season 6 has exceptional potential, especially if they keep on the direction they did. Like season 4 was like probably Supergirl's best season. Season 5 was like really good as well, and I think season 6 can be a really good send-off just based on what they've given us so far.
Yeah, season 5 just had a lot of like extra like plot threads going around, so it made it hard to navigate sometimes. But that finale just like kind of like mashed them all together all of a sudden, and all of a sudden you only have to wrap up a little bit like based off, because Supergirl I think was probably the one that felt like it had a natural ending for like a finale, but that and Flash definitely both felt like they're cut short. I feel, but I think that's okay, because if they decide to do that 2 halves of the season type deal to finish it off, I think it definitely lends to that. But I think the potential is through the roof, and it shapes up to be a very good send-off season.
Oh, and last season they put a lot of focus on Dreamer too, and like the relationship with Brainiac, I think is also going to be really important. I really like Dreamer as a character.
Yeah, I think she will be, because I love her powers. I think they're very interesting, like the dream base, like it's foresight, but also it's almost like mind waves, kind of like control of mind waves, like that kind of thing. And combining that with, I think that's, and especially to like compare that with Brainy, who's like essentially a cyborg-esque type character, like that human robot, like towing the line. I think comparing someone so human with someone so not quite human, it allows both of them to be even better characters. And I think that's great. And I would love to see what they continue to do with the Dreamer going forward, because if we want to see Supergirl go off into the future, Dreamer would be the natural next hero of National City. So I would like to see the season have her even coming into more of her own, being a true representation of the city, like that kind of thing.
And also the whole episode, like Dreamer's, like the episode that was primarily focused on Dreamer's story arc last season, about the villain that was like very transphobic and like anti transgender people. I think that's like a good starting point for developing Dreamer more, like recognizing there are people that aren't totally accepting of of people that are transgender, but I think working through that and working past that on the show, like by showing that Dreamer is like just as good of heroes anyone else, and with some like exceptional powers, establishing her as like a Supergirl level hero could make it really, really impactful, specifically because that's not an obstacle we've seen overcome in a CW show yet. Yeah,
I agree with you entirely.
Cool. All right, so we have 3 more shows that are still going. Superman and Lois, we have nothing going on. Like we have seen nothing. We've seen the trailer. That's about it. It looks like it's a family drama. And the crisis impact is that pre-crisis, Superman and Lois just had a baby. Now they have 2 teenage sons. So that's my... I'm like, this kind of gives me Man of Steel like flashback vibes for like Kal-El trying to figure out his powers. I feel like that's kind of be the center of season 1 is like, our dad is Superman. Are we Superboy? And like that type of stuff. What do you think?
I would agree with you. I think the question of are we Superboy will be ringing in our heads for a very long time. I really like this because it allows us, one, to see a family drama, which is something we kind of saw with Stargirl, but it's going to be interesting to see it from that super standpoint. I'm interested to see them give this Lois Lane character some more depth in that way. Because, I mean, I told you about it. When we first saw Lois, I wasn't the biggest fan of her. She wasn't always my favorite, but she really grew on me as it went on. And I really like the way it's done. I really like the Superman character. I'm interested to see having 2 super sons. So the thing I'm most interested in is seeing, because I think this will be our way to bring in like more of those villains, not necessarily like characters that are very Superman-esque that you couldn't fit in with Supergirl. And so something I'm really hoping to see, probably not this season, but going forward, is I'd like to see Crypto the Superdog.
Yes.
Yes.
That's just something that I could easily see coming in through this. And so I think it's just going to be a really fun, lighthearted show while still having that Arrowverse flair.
I honestly kind of want like the Sky High kind of vibe with the Suns, where like Will, he's at school and then all of a sudden he's like protecting his friends and then he finds out he has super strength. And it's not till the end that he has like flying abilities. But I think that would be like really interesting to see too, like how they are in the real world if they don't know that they have powers, and then all of a sudden like having that, oh shit, like something's happening and I shouldn't be showing this off, and maybe even getting, I'm gonna bring in Spider-Man into this, but like how Peter Parker has Ned, and the one of them getting like a best friend that's like, here, try this, and keeping it from Clark Kent, and then all of a sudden like they blow up the barn or something, and then they find out that one of the boys has superpowers. Like, I think that would kind of be adorable, but also like that family dynamic of teenagers not wanting to tell their parents stuff and trying to hide stuff, and the who am I trope of coming of age type thing. I think that would be interesting.
Yeah, I agree. I think that'll the whole family aspect of it will definitely be a different feel of the Arrowverse. But my biggest thing is, since Supergirl is ending, Supergirl is Earth Prime's protector. Like pre-crisis and post-crisis, like Supergirl is the most powerful hero we have in the Arrowverse. And if she, goes off to the future, or for some reason is no longer on Earth, and Superman and Lois have moved back to Kansas, that kind of makes Superman the de facto, person in charge, de facto most powerful person. And if he's also trying to raise super sons and doing that, that is like a big thing. That's a lot of responsibility. It's a lot of stuff to juggle. But if the super sons have superpowers and can join in, that's also a different dynamic to throw into the whole Arrowverse as well. Like, not only do you now have Thunder and Lightning, who we haven't seen in a crossover yet, but are like confirmed same Earth now, you also have super sons. So like, there's like the old, the old guard of, Flash, Arrow / the Spectre, Superman / Supergirl if she's still around, the Legends, and then you have the new guard of Thunder and Lightning, Superboys. Who else has kids? I guess like Nora Allen, if she comes back, even though she got dusted. She got Thanos.
You got Arrow's daughter.
Oh yeah, you have
son.
Yes, you have William, and let's see. Did she call herself the Green Arrow, or did she have a different name?
I thought she used a different.
She goes Green Arrow.
She goes by Green Arrow. Okay.
Yeah, but like we know, there's always that. There's a certain block with that one.
Yeah, we haven't heard anything about that one. Green Arrow and Canaries doesn't seem to have been green.
I think it's canceled.
It got
I think
canceled
Green Arrow and
officially?
Canaries. Yeah.
So, which is, it's fine. I kind of liked leaving Arrow alone. I liked the legacy of it. But all right, my favorite part of the Arrowverse, we're going to talk about Legends of Tomorrow. Zane's background is the god of the Arrowverse. We have Bebo,
god of war.
Yes. So the way we left off with Legends is they did get to finish the season So they took on the Fates. They won. We have a kind of a mix-up of the roster. We have Constantine's still there. We still have Nate. We have Behrad and new Zari 2.0, and Heatwave, as well as Astro. So like that's our.
Yeah. Well, and we also have Ava, because she'll be the captain. But the reason Ava's their captain is, well, I mean,
Sarah Lance got abducted by aliens.
And that is, so normally that feels like such a God from the Machine ending. Like, that's like straight Deus Ex Machina. But it fit the show. And that's just, I think that's one of those things that's such a testament to the show, is the fact that you're in the last 2 minutes of your season finale, and one of your main characters from the start is just abducted by aliens. And you're like, yeah, this fits. Like, this is natural.
Mm-hmm.
And I am incredibly excited because we know, I think, because we know that it's just interesting to think about the aliens could be who are abducting her. And we know that this is the year that would have matched the Hawk people from now post-crisis, where they could be coming back. So, like, are we going to finally get a return of Hawkman and Hawkgirl in a way with this? Like, you know,
the Thanagarian War. I know that was
exactly.
We had that line in the Justice League animated show. And also we forgot a very important member of Team Legends, and it's not Gideon. It is Gary. Gary, the most important legend.
The poor man. He's just vibing always.
He's vibing all the time. Like, I like Gary, but I don't like weird Gary. Like, you know, the difference between like the episode where Gary was found on the ship by Zari, like when it kept blowing up, in the Groundhog Day situation, and then we have like Gary when he's shirtless most of the episode. Nipple Gary, yes.
Yeah. Where we have to get the virgin nipple, you know. Yes,
where for those of you who aren't familiar with Legends, in the season premiere of season 4, season 4, because it was the unicorn. That was the first season with Constantine. In order to capture a unicorn, the unicorn needed to eat the nipple of a virgin, the flesh of a virgin. So they used Gary as bait, and the unicorn bit off his nipple, which was the weirdest concept ever.
A very uncomfortably relevant plot point as the season wore on.
I won't touch on it multiple times.
Yeah, but it was there, and it was persistent, and it was interesting. But I don't think regular Gary would be as endearing if we didn't have weird Gary as well.
That's fair.
Also, the monstrosity that was Train Gary, though, that was probably the weirdest Gary of last episode of last season.
Yes, Train Gary. For anyone who hasn't watched Legends, this show is going to sound ridiculous. It is very stupid. Just all of the reality warping. If any of you have started watching WandaVision, it's kind of like the reality warping that's happening in WandaVision if it was a meme. And was very aware that it was a meme.
I cannot recommend to anyone enough to watch Legends of Tomorrow. Like, right off the bat, the characters are a little confusing because they're essentially cast-offs chosen from other Arrowverse shows, both villains and heroes. And so you're a little confused as to their origins and backstories. But throughout the first season and immediately afterwards, they all just delve into their own streams, and occasionally it calls back to their origins, but it becomes its own beautiful mess that is just so bizarre and so aware that it's bizarre that it's truly hilarious. Like, when I say shows are funny, that doesn't mean I'm laughing when I'm watching, but when I watch Legends of Tomorrow, I truly am laughing out loud when I am watching it, sometimes by myself, and I'm not ashamed to say it. It's so uniquely written.
But the thing is, if you watch Legends season 1, it's trying to be as serious as Flash and Arrow, and then season 2, you're like, okay, they're kind of getting funnier with it. But the villains are still Reverse Flash, Damian Dark, and Malcolm Merlin. So it's okay, they're villains, and then you get season 3, where the culmination of the season is they've been saying the villain's name wrong the entire season. He corrects them when they finally meet him, and to beat him, they have to get a bunch of like mystical totems together to form what you see behind Zane as a giant Bebo, which is the Elmo of the Arrowverse. And then season 3 was just like, everything hit the fan. That was it. We're done. We're done trying to be serious. The show is a joke.
And to like further include, like, it wasn't like they just thought of Bebo. We actually got Bebo prior in the season as the return. Like, so the Arrowverse shows have a mid-season finale. Well, Legends of Tomorrow used to, and it was at episode like 8. And so episode 9 hits, and the big thing with Legends of Tomorrow is they travel through time. And all of a sudden in episode 9, they go back to the new world being discovered, and it's around Christmas time. And instead of embracing Christianity, they mess with the timeline, and it becomes a Bebo Day, who is their god of war. And at that point, Bebo has just become this, it's almost your mascot for the show in the way that it's so strange, but because of how they managed to fit it in, it works, and it's funny, and it's just lighthearted. And the thing that really brings Legends together for me is the writing. Like, each character has such great storylines. They're able to just keep throwing stuff at the wall and making it stick. But it works in the show. And even though this is so bizarre, everything that happens drives the plot. Like, there's nothing that I can think of recently where I felt like, okay, I like this, but it doesn't need to be here. Mm-hmm. Everything I've seen is like, okay, yeah, this drives something forward. This makes the show better. This adds to the storyline. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things about it, is that it all works.
Yeah, it is an amalgamation of everything, but also nothing. So yeah, Hope.
Okay, so this is like one of few clips that I've seen of Legends of Tomorrow. Lucifer, do you think that he would come back? Or no, because he was just playing a specific part for...
No. However, the Lucifer crossover in Crisis, where like he and John Constantine are friends, is like, as a fan of Lucifer and of Legends, that was gold. I loved that so much. I don't want to give too much away because we are running low on time, but Legends is really good. High prediction. Like, Zane and I are kind of on the same page. I'm thinking either the Thanagarians are coming back, or we might get Starro as the main villain. But beyond that, I don't want to like get too deep into that, just because Legends is just a cluster of a bunch of stuff, and I can go down a million rabbit holes for that. But the last main show is, yes, Legends could have its own episode. Flash, probably the biggest show in the CW with the biggest following, that ended really weird. Like, it ended like the only one that ended that felt like it should not have ended yet. We end with the cliffhanger. Yes, we end with Eva, or Mirror. I call her Mirror Master just because like that's who she is, based off the comics, but they haven't called her that yet. Exiting the Mirrorverse so she can finally get her revenge, leaving Iris in there, Barry pretty much permanently losing his speed until they can come up with the artificial Speed Force. And then
Iris in the Mirrorverse. Like, Iris is gone in the Mirrorverse.
Oh yeah, Iris
is gone in the Mirrorverse.
Gone. Which my theory is Iris is getting powers from this. Also, there's kind of an unfinished storyline with Reverse Flash related to the artificial Speed Force as well. We're also getting a new main character. We're getting like a new season regular in Chester, who we only saw a couple times. So like, this season, like right off the bat, has a million questions to answer, and really not enough time to answer them all. And so the biggest thing is, how are we getting the artificial Speed Force, and how are we beating Ava?
So I think the artificial Speed Force. So Cisco's gone off to Atlantis to get the final piece, a perpetual motion machine, which is interesting. So I think the only way that, because they need this, like, they're trying to recreate it from their knowledge of Thawne, but Reverse Flash. But I don't think they're going to be able to do it on their own. And I think they might need to go to find Thawne and have him help out. And I think what's going to happen is eventually with all these Godspeed clones, like we talked about this off screen before, but like where it could be that the Reverse Flash just possesses one of them to use as his like vessel, because we saw his negative speed force escaping from which Wells is this? What's his name? What do we call him?
Oh, Nash Wells.
Yes, Nash Wells. I knew it was like Tennessee or something like that. We see the speed force the negative speed force escaping from Nash Wells and going into the sky. So he'll find another body. Like I think that's going to be one of the biggest plot points of this coming season is where is the Reverse Flash? But so I'd imagine that they might end up needing his help for that, because I don't know if they're going to be able to pull it together on their own. Mm-hmm. But I think that's really interesting. And the Mirror Master, we'll call her Mirror Master, to defeat her, I'm really interested in that. I think it's going to involve needing Iris to come back, especially because we're going to need the knowledge of how that works to get her back in, like the Mirrorverse I'm referencing. And I think we'll just have one of those surprise coincidences where the episode right before we are finally able to stop her, the Speed Force is back, something like that, mm-hmm. kind of, because I think we'll need that to be able to handle it. But I'm not entirely sure the exact way in which that's going to wrap up, because it's not like the way that she's been displayed so far is that she's not necessarily going to be Maleficent in how she's behaving right off the bat. Like, we don't know what her game is at this point.
Mm-hmm. Like, we know she needs to be stopped, but we don't necessarily know why.
Yeah.
So that's exciting going
into that. And so there's no pressure to do it right away is also part
mm-hmm.
of it. Like, because you can't just take her down unless you can prove that there's a reason to take her down. Because she's not quite a public figure.
Yeah, she's not quite like Bloodwork, like in the same season last season. Like, he was very clearly like, he's going to infect everyone. And like and
what's going to come of Bloodwork now going forward too?
Exactly.
We know, because he just wanted the drop of himself out of that containment cell. So what's that play there? There's a lot of things that were left out there for us to think about.
Yes, and Flash probably has the most questions to answer.
So I saw something on social media somewhere, I don't remember where exactly, and I of course just breezed right past it. But I saw something about Rick Cosnett coming back and playing a character on Flash, not as Eddie Thawne, because he's dead, but coming back and playing a different character.
Cobalt Blue.
Yes.
And that's what could be. So they've said that this year is going to have 2 separate villains in this. And so I think the first 8 episodes are going to be wrapping up Mirror Master, setting up the Speed Force coming back. And I think somehow what happens is one of those Godspeed clones combined with Reverse Flash, that might create our Cobalt Blue situation. And I'm not sure how that would necessarily work, but it follows a similar storyline that there's already this prior relationship between Barry and Cobalt. And so I think that would be the best way that we get that back. And I think Cobalt Blue would be an excellent villain to have, especially based on everything we've seen, where Barry needs to come to terms with this new Speed Force. We have the Reverse Flash just being around. We have Speed Force clones just going around everywhere. I think it would be a good time for it.
So with all these questions surrounding Flash, one of my biggest questions, specifically because Black Lightning's coming to an end, Supergirl's coming to an end, do we think that an end of the Flash is in sight, like could be soon? Just because Arrow got 8 seasons, and Arrow, in my opinion, was the strongest CW show, like Arrowverse show. And they stopped it at 8 seasons because Stephen Amell wanted to leave and all the other stuff. How much longevity do we have left on Flash?
So first, I think the thing we need to consider first off is, and this isn't to badmouth anyone, I'm not saying that, but Stephen Amell wanted out after season 7, and he agreed to come back to give a proper send-off in 8, an even better one, so they could wrap it up. He becomes Spectre, all that stuff. There was a reason for that. I believe, so Flash is the, Grant Gustin's contract, I think, ends after 7 as well. But Grant Gustin really, I think he's at a point where he could keep going with Flash. I don't think not that I felt like Stephen Amell wanted out of Arrow, but I'm not saying that, but I could see how he was ready for the next step. But Grant Gustin, I feel is really loving being the Flash. And the thing also with Flash is, even though I think I agree with you, Brendan, that Arrow I felt was probably the best, it's not the one that's been rated the best. Ever since Flash has come out, it has been the cash cow of the CW in that way. Yeah. And so I see easily this season wraps up. This would not be last season. And I don't think 8 would be last season either. I can see this wrapping up, and then there'll probably be another speedster villain in 8. But I think it needs to end with a Reverse Flash again.
I agree with you. Which is why I thought 7 might be, because there's like this, bleeding effect over from Reverse Flash, but I don't right now, I don't think it's going to be that way.
So I guess I could see 8, but I also see them doing one more season out of it. After extending past Arrow.
I think Grant Gustin is definitely the driving force. And I think because he definitely came into his own, got more confidence while playing Flash, as an actor himself. So I think he is the leading force on whether or not it's going to keep going. And I think for him, he'd need a good ending for Flash before he'd agree to fully end Flash. I think he'd need that wrap up and Flash feels like he's done, and Barry Allen's comfortable with just going and being a normal human being and working with the police department and everything, and just kind of living out his life.
I hope you and I have very different ideas on how Flash is going to end.
Yeah,
my theory is it's going to be this whole circle of whatever Reverse Flash's plan is involves Barry going faster than he has ever gone before.
Yeah.
And involves him going into the Speed Force and becoming the bolt of lightning that struck him in season 1 that turned him into the Flash, that pure Speed Force energy. And then you just start the show all over again. And that's my theory. That's happened in the comics. That's what I think they're going to pull. And my fingers crossed, because I think that would be a really cool ending. We are running low on time. And there's one thing I wanted to talk about with Zane before we left that I thought would be really fun. Zane and I have been fans of the Arrowverse shows from the beginning, and one of my favorite parts of the shows are the villains. So I wanted to talk with both of you, Zane. Yeah. Zane, I know you have a top 5. Hope I asked you the question before.
Top 5.
What are your top 5 Arrowverse villains of all time? Zane, do you want to go first?
I was gonna say.
Okay, so my first question, I want one question for you. Are we allowing a specific? If there were for example, a specific group of villains, so for example, a Legion of Doom or the Earth X leaders, are we allowing that to count as one of the villains, or would you a singular villain in that case?
I would count, let's say I'll do the Legion of Doom example, because that has villains from other seasons. If you were to say, let's say Malcolm Merlyn is in your top, you could say both Legion of Doom and Malcolm Merlyn, but Malcolm Merlyn, I would hope you would consider his time in the Legion of Doom in putting him in your list.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, because I also like to so I'm going to start by explain. I'm going to go for 5 to 1 when I eventually do this. But first I'd like to say what I consider when I look for a good villain. I look for one who I look for 2 things. One is the way in which they affect our hero, our main character, how they drive them. Are they a foil? Are they a good match? Do they push them to the edge? Something like that. But also something that I'll consider is the way in which they're developed themselves. And so those are 2 things that I'm considering. So I'm going to start with 5. I chose our opposites from Earth X, the way we have Overgirl, we have the leader of the Reich as Arrow. I think that's very important. I like that because it allows us as viewers to see what if things just went a little different. It's one of those classic alternate history things. So not only it's the Nazis one, but our heroes pushed to darkness. Mm-hmm. And so it gives us the idea, what happened if Oliver's pushed to darkness and he interacts with Supergirl who's also pushed to darkness. And so then he ends up never interacting with Felicity, and we get to see that kind of development. And so that's kind of why I like that. But honorable
Does this
mentions,
include Reverse Flash in that?
No, I'm not.
No?
I'm not
Okay.
counting that because Reverse Flash is something different. I will. My honorable mentions for that one also are is Ray / Neron, because seeing Ray as because Ray is a shining light of a human being. He is your scout. He is just kind. And so seeing him as a villain was very interesting. And plus Neron was interesting in the way that he manipulated things. And both of those, I could anticipate being surpassed by Alice once I see how her arc wraps up. Alice being from Batwoman. Number 4, I'm going with Lex Luthor because I enjoy the way that I like his planning abilities. I enjoy the way he's pushed Supergirl. And because of how iconically he is against Superman, seeing Supergirl being able to stand up to him allows us to feel more about how powerful Supergirl is and how much of strength she has, and also the way that Luthor has been able to insert himself into situations that drive the plot along, but also make it so you can't get rid of him right away. It makes him stick around. And also John Carter does an amazing job as Luthor. Number 3, I'm going to reverse Flash. And that's kind of low for some people, but that's kind of where I'm at. Obviously he's an iconic Flash villain. The way he masquerades as Harrison Wells as his mentor to Barry Allen in the first season, that's excellent writing. He keeps showing up. He's constantly tearing down Barry's life. It's in the name. He is the reverse Flash, where he will always be Barry's reverse. And it's just perfect the way that you can see that what if a speedster goes wrong? And it's so terrifying. Nothing's more iconic than the shaking hand through the heart. Like, that's it. Seeing him in prison, perfect. Yeah. Number 2, I'm going with Prometheus from Arrow. And so I like this. And going into this list, Brendan asked me to prepare this. He's always been my number 1. And so, but right now he's my number 2, and I'll explain why not when I get to number 1. But Prometheus, he was only 1 season, but his value is in the way that he shows the gravity of Oliver's decisions, how everything Oliver's done has had lasting effects into other people's lives, but also he's been able to push Oliver, not physically like anyone else, but mentally, and forcing Oliver to acknowledge what he's become and what he's done, which at the time was bad and made Oliver, feel terrible and question himself. But in acknowledging that, Oliver was able to grow and become the hero that we see at the end of the series, in being that truly not only a good hero, but a good man, that kind of thing. And number 1, I'm going with Damien Dark. And so originally, now this
interesting.
This is not interesting. Now, I thought of, I told you, I thought about this, Brendan, but so season 4, he's not a great Arrow villain and this is where it starts. He has mystical powers, but he has this sarcasm and joy to him that's so unique and almost cruel in a villain. Like the things he does, but then the jokes he makes at the same time. It's so, and in Arrow, it didn't always fit, but that's where we saw this start. We saw him start as he wanted a better world. He wanted to protect his daughter, and he loved his wife. That's what we hear about Damien Dark. And then what we get to see as time wears on is he ends up we get to see him in Legends season 2, where he becomes a part of our Legion of Doom. And now his jokes don't seem as bizarre because he's in a more setting of that. But the thing is, he wants his control back. He wants revenge. He wants to show he makes the Legends his essentially his slaves, and they're his private killers. And we can see that he just wants revenge for all the people who wronged him before. But he ends up switching because he doesn't like what Reverse Flash is doing. He doesn't like the way Reverse Flash is making it all about him. You can see this shred of just something else there. And then we see in season 3, where it turns out he had himself preserved, and we found out his daughter Nora is fully grown, and Damien Dark is revived from the dead. And now all he's back is with the vengeance. And it turns out he's supposed to be a vessel for Malice. But at the end, it's his daughter that was prepared for Malice. But we see in the season finale of 3 that Damien Dark doesn't want that for his daughter. He wants more. And leading up to that point, we see that all he really cares about is Nora. He just wants a better world for her. He wants her to be able to be her best. And so he gives up his life in order to let Nora live and not have to be the vessel for a demon. And we get to see him one more time. And this is when I realized I think he's my favorite villain, and not maybe because of his villainy, but because of him as a character, is in season 5 of Legends of Tomorrow, where he's brought back as an encore meant to just rain death upon the planet. And instead of first going down to start raining death, he visits his daughter, Nora, and he wants to hear about her life and everything like that. And it ends up being not happy with her. But then Nora just comes clean and says, you know what, I'm with Ray. He makes me happy. He makes me be myself. And Damian comes around and he's like, in the end, Nora doll, this is all I want for you. And you know, it happens. But at the end of that episode, he goes, it's time for him to go because he'll be called back to hell because he won't complete his task. And you can see him walking out of the mansion where it's at. And he doesn't say goodbye to his daughter because he doesn't want to let her know, or Ray. But he tells Ray before he goes to make sure you treat my daughter well and do whatever it takes for her. But at the doorway, he sees Sarah Lance. And as we know from season 4, he killed Sarah Lance's sister. Sorry, spoiler. But at this point, you should know. And he says, for what it's worth, I truly am sorry that I killed your sister, and I would take it back if I could. And then he walks out. And then we see that he took a Hellblade, which is the only thing that can truly annihilate someone from hell. And so instead of going back to hell and having to once again go back and possibly engage in evil acts and be sent out to do evil, he would rather leave his daughter peacefully and just no longer exist in any capacity, no soul, in order to leave his daughter be. And I think that kind of character development and power towards family, but also the way that we've seen him have such strong violence and powers and magic, I think that makes him the ideal villain as a character. But if we're looking at just as the ideal villain, then Prometheus would probably be that. But my number 1 would be Damien Dark.
Very interesting. I've never looked like I appreciated it in like most recent season of Legends, but at that point I no longer saw Damien as a villain. And that's why I think that's the difference between, like, because for me, season 4 Damien, I was like, left a bad taste in my mouth. I liked him when he got on Legends, and then season 6, by then I'm like, he's just kind of like a recurring character. I'll give my top 5 in a sec, but Hope, do you have any comments?
So I will say that I do have a top 5 list, not in any particular order. And a lot of them are from like early seasons because I haven't watched the later seasons as much. But so I'll just go down the list. So I've got the Music Man, who is Darren Criss. There was that Supergirl Flash episode. And I liked that one because like he wasn't like a true villain, but it was one of those like, how do we get it so we can have a musical episode, but also how do we get back on track for these two shows? Because it seemed like they were both kind of like, all of a sudden, like writers were like, oh shoot, we like screwed up on writing and we don't know how to get it back. So let's bring in this villain and have a crossover episode and get everything back on track. But also like Darren Criss is just phenomenal at acting like that slightly evil way while also like completely knowledgeable.
Also, his villain was like weirdly omnipotent, and I'm upset we haven't seen him again.
I know. I would absolutely love to see him again. That would be fantastic. Like, you wouldn't even need him for a musical episode. I mean, obviously he's the Music Man, so you gotta have music somehow. But like, you know, I would be okay if it wasn't a musical episode, but we got him back. Next one on my list is, I believe it was the Trickster, played by Mark Hamill in Flash. Mainly because like there are villains, so like there's different types of villains, and like I really like the ones that are just purely evil for the sense of being evil. Like they might have a backstory, but also they've kind of like transitioned into the I just want to spread chaos and have fun with that. And I absolutely loved that. And the fact that it was Mark Hamill, also, you know, Luke Skywalker being completely evil and crazy, it was phenomenal.
He plays more villains than he does heroes. He's got Luke, and then in his villain, he's like Joker, Trickster, Firelord Ozai. Yeah,
and it's just interesting because, you know, he's the iconic hero being...
He's also the iconic villain.
Like, yeah. Then I had the Toymaker, so Wynn's dad in Supergirl.
Oh, yeah, Toyman.
Yeah, because he... Honestly, like, you can see the change in Wynn after he deals with his dad that one time. because he's like, I don't want to end up like my dad, where my dad wasn't making decisions. And he's like, I'm going to be brave. And he tells Kara how he feels. And I'm like, that's what we needed to get Win to see what he could become and what he wants to become. And how does he go about doing that? And how does he figure himself out?
I miss Win.
Yeah, I love Win. Slade Wilson, Deathstroke. Because one, again, I love the actor. But two, I think it was just like perfect because it brought about what Arrow, what he needed to do, Oliver Queen needed to do. What was it really that you wanted to protect your city? Get it to being like who destroys your city, or are you really just trying to protect your family and your family name and like reinvent that? And Slade Wilson is, he's out for revenge because he blames Oliver for the death of the girl that they were both in love with on the island. But it's just like, it also makes Oliver think about like what truly matters to him. And then again, going off of that with Mon-El's mom, that I can't remember her name.
Rhea.
Rhea, yes. When she comes and she just is like, I want to, protect my son and make this for him. But honestly, she's also just like manipulating everyone to fit her needs. And she's like that one that you love and you hate at the same time, because you want to believe that she wants what's best for her son, but then you also see her being a complete bitch and manipulating everyone and going like, no, I absolutely hate you and you're terrible and you should die. And, obviously she does. But, those are my top 5 that I had.
Rhea and the Daxamites were always... That season was really weird, just because like you thought it was going to be like Lillian Luthor the whole time, and like going with LexCorp as the villain and Cadmus. But that twist at the end kind of threw me for a loop, and I think that's why I never really fully appreciated Rhea and the Daxamites, because I thought that was going to be maybe season 3, but I still appreciate the whole that whole fight with Supergirl at the end. So to start mine off is actually one that Hope mentioned. My number 5 is Deathstroke. Going with like the early seasons of Arrow, like the season 1 on the island with Slade, you're like, oh no, he's a friend, and then like season 2, you're like, oh, never mind. And then him coming in and just like, he was the original one that really messed with Oliver. Like Malcolm Merlin was like a good villain and a great like mirror to Oliver to start, but then once Oliver's growth started, I feel like Deathstroke came in and really manipulated him.
Because it got under his skin. Like it got under his skin, Deathstroke did. Like he could strike those chords.
And not just the Arrow, but also Oliver Queen, because he knew that he could figure that out. He knew how to manipulate the situation. The reason he's not hired, because he used to be before other villains on my list showed up, he used to be my number 1. The reason he's not higher, post-crisis, he doesn't kill Moira. Which I know that's Oliver doing that, but that timeline change is like, okay, that was one of his big defining moments that he no longer has. Yeah. Also, him becoming more like a hero later on and like having that son and having his son working with Oliver to try and redeem his son post redemption and kind of blaming the fact that he was a villain on the Mirakuru, I feel like kind of takes away some of like his best parts. Still think he's a great villain, great character. Manu Bennett's a great actor, but that pulls him back on my list. But like, I think he stays on here for pure nostalgia and how good he was at the time before we had the whole Arrowverse. He really kept me he got me into the Arrowverse after Arrow season 2. My number 4, some people might think it's a bit low, but I put Reverse Flash as number 4. As of season 2 or season 3 of Flash, he probably would have been my number 2 or number 1. However, after season 5, season 6, I feel like he's getting a little stale. He has potential to keep going, to be the Reverse Flash, like the Eobard Thumb that destroys Barry's life that you see in the comics, that you see in the animated movies, and what I'm hoping we'll see in the live action movie. But I feel like right now he's falling a little flat, and I feel like part of that is because they're kind of relying on him being a Wells a little bit too much. I know they lost the actor, but I just feel like that was damaging to the character, and I feel like if they can either get him in a new body or like differentiate him from the original Wells character, they can do a lot more with him. Yeah, Zane.
And I'm pretty sure Tom Cavanaugh is going to be done soon. So I think you'll be seeing that anytime now.
So
I don't remember reading that. I don't know if it's this season or like soon, but I think he wants to move on just amicably.
And I like would totally respect that too. And I think like once that happens, they can also expand his power level, like really show how like into the negative speed force he is, how much he understands about like the fabric of the universe itself, and how much he can manipulate it, not only to mess with Barry, but to mess with everything, like the whole grand scheme. Like he could be on power level, like equivalent to the Anti-Monitor in Crisis, like if they gave him the full control over the speed force. And I think that would be really interesting. My number 3, which might come as a bit of a surprise to people, but my number 3 is Alice from Batwoman season 1 and hopefully like through season 2. I just thought like I feel like she kind of gives the vibes of like the Joker of the Arrowverse, but also like you don't think the Joker is redeemable under like any sense, but there's a bit of like me as a character that kind of wants her to like come back to like being Beth, not just being Alice, but I don't think that's actually going to happen. But the way that her character is portrayed is like, there's still that little bit of hope. You know, she might still be good, like inherently good, but none of her actions ever show that. And just like how calculated she is without like no powers, no like necessarily any like combat training. All she has is like trauma. And she's like, I'm going to use this to fuel my rage and my hate for this city and my family forever. And just based off that, she's like, on par with some of the best villains in the Arrowverse. I think her stuff is way more psychological. And I think that in season 1, they've shown her like, not just like most villains, like until you like get to the point where you beat them, they seem invulnerable. However, Alice has shown that she's very vulnerable most of the time. Like psychologically, it was really easy for Kate to manipulate her, just like it's easy for her to manipulate Kate and now Ryan. So I think that's something interesting. Like she is very much a vulnerable villain. And I think that kind of pushes her up there on my list. My number 2 is Lex Luthor. I think as a strategist, he's probably the best villain in the Arrowverse. And I think John Cryer's portrayal of him has been amazing. Probably my favorite portrayal of a Lex Luthor ever, including some like one-off comic runs besides like the base one. And I think just like him as like a behind the scenes manipulator in season 4, like where you did not think like he was really involved at all. And all of a sudden Lex Luthor's the bad guy. But not in a way like Rhea in season 2, where it's like, oh, all of a sudden she's here. It's like, no, this was Lex from the start. He has been the villain throughout this whole thing. And I think, like Zane mentioned, as an adversary to not just Supergirl, but like Superman before her, kind of like hypes up his credibility as a villain. And in post-crisis, his ability to like kind of manipulate Brainy, even though like Brainy was trying to manipulate him, I think is really interesting. Before I say my number 1, I'm going to list off some honorable mentions. I'm going to go Zoom from Flash season 2. He just doesn't have that same like, he's just kind of psycho. And it's not the same like as Reverse Flash, who's really like calculated. And I think that's really good. And Zoom has like no redeemability, like nothing necessarily to like about him. And that's what makes him a really good villain. But there's a ceiling on how good of a villain he can be because of that. Also Agent Liberty from Supergirl season 4. Sam Witwer's just a really good actor and I really like him. And like, I think him as a villain is what cemented Supergirl as like a really good show. I also really liked the Anti-Monitor in Crisis on Infinite Earths, simply for the power level of that. Like, that was a real challenge. Like there was doubt that they could win in Crisis. And then finally, honorable mention, Gravedigger from Black Lightning season 3, simply because I feel like his existence cements like the Black Lightning arc really well. Like it makes that universe make sense even outside of the Arrowverse. And my number 1, I don't think Zane will be surprised, is Prometheus, which is why I was shocked when it wasn't your number 1, because I thought we agreed on this. But his like psychological game with Oliver, like the most intense scene in the Arrowverse for me is when he captures Oliver Queen, tortures him to the point where he gets Oliver to admit that Oliver enjoyed killing people when he was on the island, like and that's kind of like where his internal struggle has been. Like the whole scene where Stephen Amell is like, I killed them and I liked it. Like, and then Prometheus is like, I broke you, I win. And like that whole scene, I was like, oh crap. Like he beat Oliver. Like at least at one point, he truly beat Oliver Queen, which does not happen much. Even if like Oliver gets physically defeated, in the long run, Oliver doesn't get beat. In a way, Prometheus still won at the end of season 5. So, and I think that's what makes him like a really good villain, even though like he wasn't irredeemable, he was kind of irredeemable, but in a way he was undefeatable. Like once he got that confession out of Oliver, that was it. He won. He got what he wanted, and he didn't need to do anything else. So normally here on Raving Geeks, we do some recommendations. However, I'm going to limit that real quick just because we are running long for episode stuff. So Hope,
Yes.
Number 1 recommendation for the week.
The Witcher.
The
If
Witcher?
you want to watch a Netflix show, The Witcher. If you want to read a book, read Lore by Alexandra Bracken.
Nice. Zane, 1 recommendation for the week.
I would recommend on Disney Plus, it is Cosmos and it is narrated by Neil deGrasse Tyson. It is science in digestible pieces that is good for anyone who just might want to see something about the universe that is a little deeper.
Nice. My number 1, if you're a fan of The Office, also on Disney Plus, the ABC The Muppets series. It's just The Office with Muppets. It's just kind of fun. I think it only had like 1 or 2 seasons, but it was still like enjoyable. So I enjoyed that. So thank you all for tuning in this week. I know this is kind of a longer episode, but I was really excited about this topic, and I'm hoping later we'll have some later episodes that get more in depth on some of the stuff we touched on today. So make sure you follow us on social media, leave us comments on the episodes, tell us your top 5 Arrowverse villains or any comments you have on our lists. And as always, stay geeky and have a great weeky, everyone. I will talk to you next week.